Hi everybody, meteorologist Joe Cioffi. Wednesday, February 14th, 2018, Ash Wednesday, Valentine's Day. Hope everybody's day went well. Starting off to say thank you to Joyce Mack and to Wayne S. For hitting Super Chat for coffee, cigars, and whatever. That's going to be cigar for the drive home tonight. Thank you very much. We have a lot going on today, both in the short range and in the long range, and I am going to get right to it because first we're going to tackle the short range issue. And you know, one of the things that we're seeing right now, when I put together my 7-day forecast at work today, one of the things I noticed in terms of the temperatures over the next 7 days with the snow in the middle, it actually looked like a 7-day that I might put up in early April. I mean, that's kind of how out of whack things are right now. We're really, in a way, we're undoing the extreme cold that we saw in from mid-February to mid-January. It's just kind of, we're just reversing that at the moment while the atmosphere makes this big change, this transition that is going to get underway very shortly. In the meantime, we emphasized that with respect to where we were going over the next week or so, that the only way it was going to snow around here would be if you have weather systems timing out just perfectly. We keep getting these shots of cold air that come in every 3 days or so. The cold air shots last for anywhere from 24 to 48 hours, and then they move out and we start all over again. We've seen a number of weather systems producing some decent rainfalls, alleviating the dry conditions. So at least we're being productive in this warmer pattern here that we have, and it's not just some kind of warm and dry pattern. You can see that the surface map for this evening showing snow along the Canadian border in the northern Rockies and in the northwest. Also some action down in the southwest with even some rain showers into parts of Southern California. And then as we got into a warmer air mass today and even warmer air mass coming in tomorrow here into the east, there's a bit of a warm front that is headed our way, and there are some showers in the Ohio Valley. Those will push through overnight. And then for tomorrow, with a west or a west-southwest wind, if we break out into any kind of sun, temperatures from Virginia into New Jersey and southeastern Pennsylvania, somebody's going to get to 70 or better in this, if we can break through the cloud cover. Now, tomorrow afternoon, there's a cold front that's going to be running from the lakes down through Missouri and back through Kansas and Colorado, and there's another high coming down, and there's snow up in the northern Rockies down into New Mexico and rains into southeast Arizona. Now, this front is going to push eastward. It's going to bring showers to the east and move on through. As on Friday, the rains will end, and then we'll go to drier weather, sunshine, and here is that shot of colder air, the next shot of colder air that will be moving in and moving out. But there is going to be this front, and you can see where the rain is, the measurable precip on the GFS from coastal North Carolina down into Arkansas and over in through Texas. Now, that front is stalling out. A wave is going to develop on this. And at this point, what I want to do is I want to switch over to the late afternoon NAM model because the NAM model was surprisingly aggressive. I mean, it seemed like it ate its Wheaties this afternoon because here's the NAM for the east, and there's the beginnings of this wave. The high is in upstate New York, precip breaking out across Arkansas, Oklahoma, and into Tennessee. And as we move eastward, the high moves out. Now, here's the thing. Weather weenies in the Northeast, but particularly that live down in New Jersey and Long Island and New York City and the Hudson Valley, they know that when the high moves out to the east, that's not usually a good thing for snow because that brings in a warmer flow from off the ocean. Even though water temperatures now at this time of year are at their near their bottoms, they bottom out between now and the end of the month in the upper 30s. If you have any kind of a wind that has more of an ocean component than a land component, you're going to wind up with warm air coming in at least low levels and changing precip over to rain. But in this instance, the way the model times this out is the system, the wave, is a little bit slower. So the high pulls out, and really it becomes all the low that develops off the North Carolina coast. This is by Saturday evening, 10 o'clock, with some solid snow into Long Island, southeastern New York, New Jersey, and the darker blues would indicate probably moderate snow, moderate to heavy snow, from central New Jersey, southeastern PA, over back through Maryland down to the D.C., Baltimore area, with rain in the Delmarva Peninsula touching southern New Jersey. What the NAM is suggesting is that the surface low becomes so wrapped up that it effectively pinches off the warm air from coming in from off the ocean, and what little cold air you do have winds up working its way and down at the lower levels and keeping the lower levels cold enough that this would be primarily a snow event. I'm not 100% sold on this. I think that this is a solution, by the way, that is supported by the European and by the Canadian. However, I want to switch to the German model just to see if the German model has been consistent with itself, and it seems to be. There's that surface low. See, this is the point Saturday evening where that warm air is trying to get pinched off. That was that low begins to wrap up, and the German model, the Icon model, has basically the central and south Jersey along and south of Route 195 changing over to rain, but it keeps northern New Jersey, Long Island, into southeastern New York and Connecticut all snow, and then it pulls it away out to the northeast. So the Icon model is kind of in the same camp with the NAM, Canadian, and European, and the GFS was in that camp until late this afternoon, because all of a sudden, and I'm not sure why it did this, though I'm not saying we can't rule it out, the GFS has a very suppressed look. It brings nothing of consequence, really, other than some rain into Virginia and the Delmarva Peninsula and out. And the reason why it does this is when we take a look at the upper air that it visualizes through all this. I'm going to go to Saturday night and pull up the upper air, because this is where what's been the big question is whether there is some kind of shortwave trough in this flow that is definable, and it's very hard to find on the GFS. You can barely find any kind of shortwave trough, whereas if we go to the European model, you can see it here, this kink that's off Long Island, right in there. So it has, the European has a much more definable shortwave that it focuses on. The Canadian, we'll look at that. It's there right in where you see these lines kind of curve down a little bit off of Long Island, New Jersey. That's where your shortwave is. You could at least find it on the Canadian. We don't have the Icon model to look at. The German model doesn't put up. We don't see a map similar to this, but we can look at the NAM and see there's the NAM. The NAM really has a definable shortwave. It has, in fact, it gets that northern trough involved in all this, and that is a big question. Is that going to happen? It looks as if there's an arm in that northern trough that kind of comes down and sharpens the trough ever so slightly, but it's enough that it creates all the dynamics that you see that the NAM produces. So we've got to figure that out. That's the big question. It would seem to me, all along my feeling on this was the fact that it was going to be hard to get a definable shortwave to come out in this very fast flow that we have. Things are moving so quickly from west to east, with weather systems moving in and out and staying for very short periods of time. I don't know that this is viable. Maybe the NAM is overdone. We'll we'll just have to watch the trends. Today's still Wednesday. We're talking about snow later on Saturday if this happens. And by the way, with respect to snow, I can at least show you what the NAM came up with all this. And this is still doesn't go out far enough because we're going to have to put in another 6-hour period into Sunday morning to cover areas from northeastern New Jersey through southern New England. But you can see that the snow that the NAM generates is rather substantial from central New Jersey, south and west into Virginia. I got to tell you, in a situation like this with the high going out where it is, it's hard for me not to want to argue the fact that there's going to be warm air coming in, especially for coastal areas, and I think that's a concern overall. And on top of that, we don't know yet whether the NAM has the right idea with this more viable system coming into the east. So we've got to rectify those two issues. But I did put out an early snowfall forecast, and I'll show you what I did, okay, with all this. I felt, let's call it, somebody asked me, well, what's my gut feeling? And I responded by saying, my gut feeling is the map I drew. Okay, so, this is what I did. And I basically covered for a slushy inch along the New Jersey shore, down even into coastal Delaware, I suppose, and parts of the South Fork of Long Island. Long Island's always kind of tricky in these things. 1 to 2 inches just to the north and west of there. And I kind of put this 3 to 5 inch band from western Maryland on through south central Pennsylvania, moving up into the northeast, northwest New Jersey, even into northeast New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, southern Connecticut south of Route 84, New York City, Philadelphia. I have that in a 2 to 3 inch band. I mean, like I said, I'm uncomfortably comfortable with this forecast at the moment, and the fluidity of the situation is such that it does give me some wiggle room here in both directions, and I think that's really, at 72 hours away from a start time, I want to leave myself wiggle room here, and I think given the situation that we have, it's perfectly appropriate to want wiggle room, okay? So let's now, I want to jump along over to the long range, because that is the next big issue. And we've been saying now for quite a while that the blocking pattern is going to be developing. Everything appears to be on course. When we look at today's teleconnections based on last night's 0Z run model GFS ensembles, the NAO, which is positive, it's strongly positive now, but today and tomorrow, today is the peak, and that NAO drops as we go through the next 2 days and into Saturday, and then levels off a bit, and then drops again to the neutral zone in about 7 days. So by February 21st, 22nd, we're down at the neutral zone, and then we start to accelerate downward into the end of the month. So this is going to be indicating that we are going to see the development of some blocking, and the maps will illustrate that in a minute. But when we take a look at the PNA, the Pacific North America Index, while this is all going on, you've got that very strong ridge in the Gulf of Alaska, which is putting a deep trough in the west and into northwest Canada. This is creating, plus we have a ridge off the southeast coast that's very strong. So that goes into part of the PNA calculation. So the Pacific North America Index is as off-the-wall negative as you can get, which actually peaks in its negativity, if we can say it that way, around February 19th, 20th, 21st, and then begins a slow rise, but it's still strongly negative toward the end of the period. This would, the PNA would be important if we are dealing with any kind of storm situation in the east. It would suggest that a major storm with a PNA signature like this is unlikely. It doesn't mean we can't have minor to moderate events, but a wholesale big event is not likely with a PNA like this. The EPO is kind of behaving itself. You know, it's slightly negative, gets more negative in time, then kind of goes back to the neutral line or the negative side of the neutral line, and then starts to drop a little bit again toward the end of the period. So I think we're going to have at least, you're going to have 2 out of the 3 players. Now, bear in mind that these indices changes as the models adjust and change. And I did notice that late this afternoon, at least some changes in the West might allow for that PNA to rise faster and possibly even go positive toward the end of the period if the models are correct in their views. You know, I did put up, okay, it disappeared on me, so let me just review yesterday's, and then I'll bring up the maps again. I don't know what happened to them, but here we have, this is from yesterday, yesterday's view of the model going into the long range. You could see how the jet stream is all kind of bottlenecked up. You got these strong systems basically along and south of 50 degrees north. You have higher than normal pressures as you go further north into the polar regions, and that is usually the opposite of what you see. By the way, a few people have pointed out, you know, the wholesale changes that we're seeing in terms of the magnitude of this blocking pattern. We've had blocking signatures show up for a few days to a week or so, but this is actually quite impressive, and it might have long-term implications beyond a couple of weeks. We'll see. That's only something that we can figure out as the situation evolves, but right now I would say you've got a pretty impressive block that is developing. So just bear with me 1 second here. I did set this up to show you some of the maps that we had, so I'm going to pull them up, see if I can pull these up one at a time for you. Hang on. So that's not good. I gotta, let me just get rid of this. And let's do it. I'll do it on this frame. So here we have, this is the GFS from yesterday, actually I think it's from 2 days ago. So this is from 12Z February. No, this is from yesterday afternoon. So it's from 24 hours ago. So why don't we put in, I'm going to put in the new model. And this is from late this afternoon. So here is our upper air pattern at February 20th, which is about as unblocky as you can get, with the big ridge off the southeast coast of the United States, the big ridge in the Gulf of Alaska, that really deep trough in the west. There's your negative PNA. The ridge in the Gulf of Alaska would need to be, if you have the strength of that ridge in the Pacific Northwest, you would have the Pacific North America index completely off the wall positive. But you've got this at the opposite ends here. Trough in the wrong place, ridges in the wrong place. However, at this point is where the NAO is dropping rather rapidly toward the neutral line. And from here, we go, I'm going to jump over, this is day 6, so I'm going to jump over to day 10. And I want you to notice how much the change in the upper air pattern is from day 6, which is up there on the screen now, and here is day 10 on the new GFS, which by the way is what's really been remarkable to me is, I know these models usually, as we go out in the longer range, as we know, tend to change, and sometimes they can change rather radically. Okay, what has really struck me in this entire stretch is the fact that we're seeing the GFS in particular, that we can see the GFS out for 16 days. We can only see the Canadian out for 10 and the European out for 10. It's been remarkable how the GFS has been showing this blocking signature developing in its long range period, and it has not let go of this at all. So 4 days it goes from that huge ridge in the off the southeast United States. You can see here it's completely flattened out now. The ridge in the Gulf of Alaska, while still there, it weakens and it actually shifts a bit to the east. In the Atlantic, you have a big storm that forms in the North Atlantic in the upper atmosphere, and you can see where I have blocking high written. That's that blocking high. The high forms between Greenland and Scandinavia and then builds westward across Greenland and pointing southwestward into Labrador. So by day 10, by day 7, the blocking signature is there because the NAO is going negative, and by day 10 we're starting to get those strongly negative readings telling us that the block is increasing in strength. Now when we move out, I'm going to jump one more. This is what, 240. I can jump one more period out. I'm going to go to day 13, 14. Okay, so we're going to go out another 3 or 4 days after this, and you can see what's happening in front of you right now. You can see there's day 10, and now let's look at day 14, and you'll notice what happened. The block is still there. That big blocking high has gotten even stronger. Important changes here. The upper air storm that is in the North Atlantic south of Greenland winds up dropping further south and actually retrograding to some degree back westward, which starts to put energy up into eastern Canada. This creates an upper air storm in eastern Canada, a strong flow from Canada into the east, and this would argue for below average temperatures in the east beginning after the 10th day in this model time frame. And notice now, if this is right, and this is an important development, if this is right, you do have now a trough in the Gulf of Alaska. A ridge develops inland of the west coast into the Pacific Northwest. So if we were to calculate the GFS, the PNA based on this GFS run, you would have a strong negative NAO, North Atlantic Oscillation, strong blocking, and you would have probably a strengthening positive PNA index based on this. The PNA, by the way, is calculated not only with regards to how strong the pressure rises are in the northwestern part of the Pacific, but also into that calculation comes into how low the pressures are off the southeast coast. If you have lower than average pressures off the southeast coast, that actually makes the PNA go more positive. And when you think about it, that makes sense because the stronger the ridge gets in the west, the deeper the trough gets into the east. It's kind of like a teeter-totter here. So with respect to the long range, I see nothing to change my mind about the idea that we're going into a blocking signature. I think that this blocking signature that we're seeing on the models is impressive and is something that's going to last more than a few days. And I think it's going to have implications on the long term, in terms of the chances for snow in the eastern part of the United States. Remember, it needs to be cold when the storms arrive. It doesn't necessarily need to be cold around it. And we're getting to that time of year where that tends to happen more and more. So don't be too shocked. Also, bear in mind, too, normals are rising. So we are likely, by the end of the month in New York City, the average high rises from 38 to 46. And by the, for the end of February, it's like 44, 45. By the time we get to the end of March, the average high is in the upper 50s. So that's a pretty big move to happen. An 11-degree temperature rise over 31 days. That's a sizable move, and big moves like that with the normal heating of the atmosphere creates a ton of volatility, and with a block, it could lead to all sorts of things. And by the way, depending on where the troughs and ridges line up, there's no guarantee here. We could have all this blocking, and if it's too strong and the trough is too much into the eastern part of the is off the east coast or just off the east coast, that'll suppress everything to the south, and it could just be cold and dry. I tend to think we're going to have some chances along the way. Now, this week coming up, When we go into Tuesday, very warm air moves up into the eastern part of the United States with this. There's a super warm front here that runs from the Great Lakes into southern New England, and you can see the arc of the precip kind of reflects that warm front. And in fact, when we look at temperatures, I'm going to put the Tuesday anomalies up, and look at the huge area of above normal temperatures here. I mean, we're talking 12 or more degrees above average, and in some cases, you know, probably pushing 15 or even 20 degrees above average. In terms of the actual numbers it generates, and usually I just want to caution, this is for 1 o'clock in the afternoon. These numbers are likely to be too low. But look at these 80s that show up across Florida and throughout much of the Gulf states. You've got 70s pushing up through the Carolinas. You've got 60s. I think the 60s are going to push up into southern New England, and I think the 70s may actually push up into northeastern Virginia and on up into southeastern Pennsylvania. Then, as we move into Wednesday, another warm day. You can see the 70s. This is Wednesday afternoon, but you can also see to the west where the 40s and 30s start. So there's a cold front that's going to be getting ready to push through. And indeed, when we get to Thursday, that front is by, and temperatures are beginning to cool off again. So let's back up. Let me go back to Monday, and we'll put the precip map on. So once again, we'll look at that mega warm front that runs up and then goes by. Here's another low and another cold front that comes through on Wednesday. Then you get a cold high that builds in, goes by to the north. Now at this point, remember, the NAO is crashing. So I think we're going to have to question where the model is showing all this for the end of next week. The position of the high could be, if that NAO crashes a bit faster, that high could be further northwest. This could have a colder look to it. I think that's possible. Then that goes by, and then you have another series of waves, if the way the model pictures it. I don't know if this is going to be right, but you can see the impact here of the blocking and what happens. If you look up to the north in eastern Canada, you suddenly have higher pressure building there, pressing down, cold air funneling down from eastern Canada into New England and down into the northern mid-Atlantic states. So now your storm track is going to be across the middle, okay? And what you get from that remains anyone's guess, but this is what blocks do. By displacing cold air further south, not just aloft, but obviously at the surface as well. And then there's another opportunity here as we move. We're not even into March yet, so we've already seen the models produce 3 chances here before we even get to March 1st. And actually, this one, the model develops into a fairly sizable ocean storm. The lows are going to deepen as it gets into the effect of the upper low to the north. And then still cold here, you know, pretty cold down in the eastern part of the United States as we move our way toward the end of this forecast period. The block is going to be really important in terms of how we see all of this going into the first part of March. So I think we're going to have very, let's call it, fun times, okay? I'll pull up the upper air, and we'll go back and we can rotate the upper air with all this through the whole period, and you can see how the jet stream reacts. So there's your ridge in the east that starts to build early this week. Then once we start to get into that blocking high starts to play, that ridge begins to get suppressed here. The ridge in the Gulf of Alaska gets suppressed. That's very important. That has to happen. We've got this trough that's still out in the west, but the chess pieces are getting rearranged at this point. And there's the development of this big ocean storm between Greenland and the Azores. The blocking high now pushes its way westward from Scandinavia across Greenland and just kind of pinches its way into northeastern Canada. And now you've got your upper air vortexes are all to the south, one in the Gulf of Alaska, one up in northern Montana with some energy in the west, and you've got this deep upper air system in northeastern New England. This upper low and the position that it's in would argue cold and dry once we get through whatever we get through while all of this is changing. And you got to be careful during the period that all of this is changing. That's when you could wind up with something of size. But again, this is going to be watch and wait and see. But we've got something to look at. The winter is not going to just go away. It is going to perhaps provide us with some opportunities for excitement going forward for you winter weather and snow lovers. In the meantime, you know, we've got this early taste of April weather that we're dealing with, and even there we're still getting these cold shots coming through from time to time. So let me come back to you guys. We've been yapping for so long, but good to see all of you here tonight. We've got a nice crowd. Hope you're enjoying all the extra meteorology. This might be, Weatherman Nick, the first big snow for Towson, Maryland. You know, you've been kind of in a bit of a hold in your area. There have been areas to the northwest that have gotten some, areas to the northeast that have gotten some, but you've been kind of in one of these dry holes that show up every winter in one form or another. Well, okay, let me just, by the way, I want to address something. Thank you, Marquise Vincent, and good to see you. I haven't seen you here in a while. Let me address something with regards to weather apps and you know, what you see, the Weather Channel, and so on. I'm not saying this to be critical. I'm just saying this to give you this observation. You can't possibly have an individual person writing forecasts for every single point that the Weather Channel broadcasts to. Obviously, that is all digitized stuff. It is model-based, okay? And I think they use the European model in their forecast. This is why when you see the numbers you see, I had people messaging me today saying, well, the Weather Channel said 3 to 5 inches for New York City, or 5 to 8 inches, or whatever the numbers were. The numbers actually reflect what the European model is doing. So if the European model comes in tonight and cuts everything back to 1 to 3, you're going to see their forecast suddenly cut back to 1 to 3. I don't know I don't think that does someone a good service when you're looking at something that's changing every 6 hours. I mean, I understand that weather is fluid. Of course it is, and it is going to change. But it only, you know, I can see from the comments I get a lot of times, it just creates mass confusion when you don't have, you know, somebody to kind of go in there and put in the human impact, the human interaction that's required in order to make it sensible. Okay, it's not sensible to change your snow forecast. Doubling it every 6 hours and then cutting it in half, or even taking it out completely only to put it back in. That leads to confusion. So at least when you're seeing it here, or you're seeing it wherever you're watching it in terms of your local weather person, you know, they're giving you perspective and at least connecting the dots from day to day. That's what's really important. You have to have these dots have to be connected from day to day so that folks at home can understand exactly what's going on. So, you know, that is what that is. All right, the apps are all computer generated and off the models themselves. Brian Last, how much rain for Freeport tonight and tomorrow night? Okay, so I'm thinking you're referring to Freeport, Long Island. So tonight's rainfall, I believe tonight's rainfall, there are going to be a few heavier downpours that could move through. I don't know if they're going to move over Freeport or not, and I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if there's a rumble or two of thunder tonight when all of this happens. But you're going to see that. I think most rainfall amounts tonight will be on the order of about a ½ an inch or less. And then there's the rain tomorrow night into Friday morning, which if you get into some of the heavier downpours, you know, that could be like a ½ an inch to an inch. So let's say between ½ an inch and 1.5 inches is possible. I don't think it'll be anything more than that because everything seems to be moving along at a decent clip. So it's not like you're going to have the stuff training over you for hours and hours and hours on end. I don't believe that that's going to happen. Let's see. I'm just trying to get all your comments here. So I doubt, Joshua Pan, that snow areas have symmetric distributions. There's too much variation in terms of local climate effects and geography, topography. That all has impact. Okay, so I doubt that they would be symmetrical. I'm just kind of running through here. Well, you guys are all. It is like a roller coaster, Shelly Man Studios. You guys are really getting into it tonight. Columbus, Ohio, 20 inches in March of 2008. What's your snowfall so far? I'm kind of curious, Anthony. What's your snowfall? And if you happen to know what your normal snowfall to date should be, I'd be curious about that. Weatherman Nick, you're reliving a storm in your area in Townsend, Maryland from 2015. Okay. I think there's room for this to move in both directions. So I think the NAM might be I think might be kind of on the upside end of the spectrum, and the GFS obviously with nothing is on the downside. The GFS is the only model that's not showing anything from this late afternoon run. The dayside run did show like the other models. It actually was warmer than the other models, though it was trending colder. And yes, David Fuller, I think you will see some rain tonight, and I can't completely rule out the possibility that there might be a thunderstorm. Ryan Ford, do I think the blocking signature, the negative NAO, can compensate for the relatively negative PNA? I think it can. You've got the EPO is working in your favor, so that's good. I think it can. We saw a number of snow events last year with negative PNAs. So, and including whatever happens Saturday is going to come with a negative PNA. So, it's not the end all. That is one of so many factors you look at, and I don't, honestly, to tell you the truth, I really didn't pay a lot of attention to teleconnections. I looked at them, but I really didn't get too deeply into that in terms of making my forecast. I'm actually spending more time with them and finding ways that they can be useful to me from a forecast standpoint, and they've actually worked pretty well, in terms of how I'm using them. Okay, I'm trying to compensate for the volatility and how they change from day to day, and maybe getting ahead of the curve, but they actually have helped me to some degree from a forecast standpoint. Sometimes, one of the things that I would look for example, with the NAO dropping over the next several days, even though it's positive, it is dropping. If I get a sense tomorrow that perhaps it's dropping a little bit faster than what models are showing, then it could mean that the system for Saturday will be colder and a little bit further to the south. So, I use it that way in trying to get a clue, because sometimes some models, don't always pick up on that. So that's an important thing that could impact my short-term forecast. So, in answer to your question, yes, I think if we get the NAO is negative enough, the PNA may, it could compensate to some degree for the negative PNA. Maybe not completely compensate for it, but it might compensate for some degree. The GFS trended down. The GEFs, yes, the ensembles, and they would, because of the fact that the operational late this afternoon, Joshua Pan, did go, did kind of suddenly start suppressing everything. I don't know. The WPO, Alcina Alwazi, is the West Pacific Oscillation. And I think it does have an impact, although I don't, I don't pay too much attention to it. I know some people do. That's another thing that's kind of on my list of things to learn a bit more about, and how that relates to the other indices. The NAO, PNA, and the EPO are the three that I kind of really look at on a regular basis, and less so the WPO. I'm going downhill fast. William Huber, are you getting sick? Because the flu is still going crazy around. Justin Stewart, good to see you here. 40 40 p.m. I can't read that. CM. Oh, 40 centimeters for Halifax is very abnormal. 65-year snow drought. Give us some of the white stuff. Another white one is needed. Yes. You're referring to the name of the winter storm. For you, with regards to snowfall, you know what? I want to just take a look real fast for you. Let me take a look. Let me bring the GFS back up again. And because with this blocking signature, I would imagine that this is going to at least make things a little more interesting with regards to coastal storms. Whether they lift up or not is going to depend on where where the mean trough sets up. But let me bring the surface map up. And I'll pull up southeastern Canada for my friends in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and in southeastern Canada. Where are you? There you go. And let me get rid of me. And we'll shrink this up just a little bit so we can see the whole map. You know, you can follow the date here is on the upper. If you can see it, this is for, you know, I'm going to jump back to the first day. So, you know, we've got this ridge in the east, so it doesn't look like too much is happening for you. Weak systems as we are now into next Friday. Then that system goes out, more rain, low up in northern Maine. And it looks like Newfoundland gets some here. You get mostly rain out of this. And now here's where we start to get into that blocking signature. You can see where that storm comes in. Actually comes in from the east. Look how remarkable is that. But you know, again, watching these things happening, there's that surface storm actually moves northwest and westward into Labrador, and here we have some kind of coastal storm late in the period that's offshore. So I think you're going to have stuff to watch going into the long range. This is going to, you know, depending on where the troughs and ridges line up, ultimately, will that mean some kind of nor'easter coastal storm down the road? I don't know. You got to get that P&A to go positive for that to happen, but we'll see. I think I honestly think. I honestly think that at some point something's going to, you know, there's plenty of time for at least one more opportunity for something of size in the Northeast, whether in the northern Mid-Atlantic. Whether it happens or not is another matter. I would think that during this blocking pattern, as it sets up, that at some point we're going to have, you know, a couple of events to deal with. Maybe they won't be big ones. Maybe they'll be moderate ones or small to moderate ones, more nickel and dime stuff. But that is something that we will know in the fullness of time. Let's see. You want to know the snow map for Boston, but the map cuts it off. Joe forecast DC and Cape Cod, but not Boston. All right, Delvin. Okay, so I assume you know how to get to the snow map in the Boston site, but I'll give it to you. But if you go to your, you know, local weather service site in Boston, okay, if you click on the menu, click on current hazards and click on winter, well, that brings you to the WPC. So I want to see, where do they hide the winter weathers under? Go under forecasts and go under winter weather. And I'm going to actually put the link up for you. Okay? So I promise, Delvin, I'll do this. There's nothing on it now, but when you know, when it becomes relevant, get rid of that. You may just have to copy and paste this, because I know sometimes I put links on here, they don't exactly work. But there's your link, Delvin, just for you. All right. We can take a look. I'll focus on Boston when it becomes relevant. It's hard for me to cover every single point, but I'll try and add Boston to the mix, okay? Especially if something becomes relevant with all of this as we go into the weekend. Yes, Joshua Pan, be very careful when you use snow maps. The 10 to 1 snow map will show snow even if there's freezing rain and even if there's sleet. You got to be careful with the numbers it generates. So with that, I would use the positive snow growth map if it's available for the particular model that you're looking at. Nickel and dime has been the rhyme to the rhythm to the rhyme. Might as well keep going with it. Well, you know that we did have the one storm in early January that affected coastal areas. You know, there's time. We just have to see where things line up, and they may not. You could have all this blocking and all this stuff going on, and you could just wind up with very little. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Joshua, I'm the only one who uses the Facebook account, and I think so, Joshua. I've seen some other folks that are on here that are on there. Thank you. Meg, $2 Dunkin' Donuts. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Dio Nand Kumar. One model has been a consistent. The CMC has been consistent run to run. Yes, it has. The CMC has been very consistent. The European and the NAM have been kind of lining up with this more robust. The European today gave a pretty robust snowfall. A large area of 3 to 6 from northeastern Virginia across Maryland, southeast PA, all of New Jersey, all of southeastern New York, southern New England, Long Island, up to about Boston with 3 to 6, and a band of 6 to 9 from northeast New Jersey through the Hudson Valley and across much of the southern half of Connecticut. That was what the European did. This is for later Saturday night. So we'll see how that goes. I got to talk to Andrew Delvin. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I know. You know, one of the big problems right now is the fact that there's the time constraints of trying to get all the technical work that you got to do, and at the same time, you know, we're dealing with this day-to-day weather that remains active. Once you know, we get a little calm period. Someone did help me yesterday to show me how to get Skype on, so I might be able to maybe if I can get a hold of Andrew this weekend, maybe I can Skype him into one of my live streams on Saturday or Sunday. No guarantees that I'll be able to pull it off, but we'll see. And yes, I do recall April 6th, 7th, 1982 because I wasn't here for that. I had just moved to South Texas, so I missed that snowstorm that occurred, that blizzard that occurred in this area back in April of 82. All right, coming up on 48 minutes now. So thank you so much again to Joyce Mack and Wayne S. For hitting Super Chat today. I really appreciate it greatly. Thank you all for being here. I've got a few website posts you want to take a look at that get into this blocking thing a bit more. So just check out meteorologistjoecioffi.com. And then at 9:15 Eastern Time tonight, assuming he's in a good mood, we'll be doing the Joe Rayo, Joe Cioffi Show, or the Joe and Joe Show as we call it. That's on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, at 9:15 Eastern Time. So you can jump over there and get on the weather page, like it, and then just wait till about 9:15. Okay? Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Be safe, and we will see you tomorrow.